Hello everybody, welcome to my channel Bible Time. In this video, I will explain about the Exodus date and the historical time. Zedekiah began to reign from 597 and Solomon began to reign from 1016. So when we count from Solomon to Zedekiah, we can see that there are 429 years. Remember that we have to count inclusively, and it's not the same when we count in the calculator because the count is exclusively. So you have to count inclusively, and you can see that from Zedekiah, the last king of Judah, and while you are counting backward to the past, you will see that there is parentheses between Josiah and Jehoiakim. And I did this because you know that Jehoahaz reigned 3 months, and I skipped 1 year, from 608 to 609 because we don't know what exactly happened at this time. But we know for sure that according to Jeremiah the prophet, he said that there were 23 years between the 13th year of Josiah until the 4th year of Jehoiakim. So when you're counting and when you are adding up all the numbers, when you get to Uzziah and Amaziah, there was an interregnum of 11 years. That's because we are taking the reference of the 27th year of Jeroboam, and probably during this time there wasn't king in Judah, and we don't know why. This is what the Hebrew text says about this. So we are trying to follow the Hebrew text as it is written. And so when we are counting onto Solomon, we come to the year 1016 BCE. Remember that you will not find anywhere this date on the internet or Wikipedia or maybe in some encyclopedias, because they are not following the biblical chronology, they are following the Assyrian chronology, and they just try to adjust the times with the Psalms and with some synchronism, and that they reign at the same time because they need to take some years away so it fits with the Assyrian chronology. And you will find out that there are 46 years missing in the biblical time. Now we will explain about the 480th year. According to 1 Kings 6:1, it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign. This is so important this day because we can go to the Exodus date according to this accurate date, accurate time. But I will explain and I will get to that historical time because Solomon began to reign from the first year in 1016 BCE, and his 4th year was in 1013 BCE. So when we add up 480 years, we got to the year 1492 BCE. And this is so important because you will find on the internet and many chronologers and people who like to study this and to find the day of the Exodus. They will see the year 1446 BCE, and that's because they have already taken away 46 years from the biblical time. Okay, when we get to that historical time, it was the 18th dynasty of Egypt, and during this dynasty, this is one of the most clear and recorded in archaeology, and there are so many information about this dynasty. And when we get to that date, 1492 BCE, we have some options for the Pharaoh of the Exodus, and it could be Thutmose I and Thutmose III, or maybe Thutmose II. But during this period of time, there's nothing about the Exodus, anything. And Some people have tried to synchronize this time with the Exodus, maybe trying to make some links in relation to the historical and to the biblical event in the Exodus, but you will not find anything about the Exodus during this time. We're going to see deeper the 48th year, and there is a big problem about this date. I know that there are some theories about this, but I don't agree with that. But first, we go to the Greek text, and according to the Greek text, it says the 440th year. So we know that in the Hebrew text, it says 480th year, and Greek text is not accurate. It's not as accurate as the Hebrew text. So I recommend that you study the Hebrew text, because that's the the cleanest text in the world. When we go to the Judges, from the Exodus, the 40 years in the wilderness, from Joshua unto Solomon, we know that there are more than 480 years. So there are probably about 520 or more years, and this contradicts the 480 years in the First Kings. And it's not just this. We will see another more historical records. We know that according to Josephus, Flavius Josephus, he wrote that there were about 592 years from the Exodus onto the 4th year of Solomon's reign. Also in the Samaritan chronology, we can see that there are 673 years after the Exodus, but only the Cedar Lamb, which was written during the 2nd century, he followed the 480 year. He followed it as it is written in the text, and he didn't understand that probably there are more than those years. Okay, now with Shishak that I explained before a previous video, or Shishak, he was during the time of Solomon and Rehoboam reigned. In 1 Kings, Jeroboam arose and fled to Egypt unto Shishak, or Shishak, king of Egypt, unto the death of Solomon. And in the 5th year of Rehoboam, Shishak came up against Jerusalem. So Shishak was around Rehoboam and Solomon's times, and this is so important because when we go from Shishak until Amos was the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, and the Hyksos dynasty, a dynasty from Canaan. They were Canaanites or Phoenicians. They were expelled by this Egyptian dynasty, and in the next videos I will explain that the Hyksos dynasty was the time when the Israelites were oppressed and they were slaves during that time. So from Amos was the Exodus onto Shishak. There are more than 527 years. So we need to see and we need to understand the 480 year. According to the chronology of the Samaritans in 2801, it was the first years of Israel's rule in the land of Canaan. So we can probably understand that the 480 year in 1 Kings 6, that counting began from the time when the Israelites, they inherited the land, when Joshua gave the land to the Israelites, and that was the year number 1 of the 480 years. So the year 480 year was the first year the Israelites ruled in the land of Canaan. And it makes sense because I showed you and I explained that there are more than those years from the Exodus according to the Judges and according to the Josephus and the Samaritans, and according to the pharaohs and the dynasties of Egypt. There are more than those years. So that counting began from 1492 BCE, and we have to add up 6 years, and we came to the year 1498 BCE, plus the 40 years in the wilderness. We come to the date of the Exodus in 1538 BCE, and they will be a little bit weird because this is a very early date, and the earliest date probably is in 1446 BCE, but we know that that's according to the Assyrian chronology, and they're taking away some years. So the historical date for the Exodus is in 1538 BCE. The Hyksos, that was a dynasty from Canaan. They were Canaanites who invaded Egypt, and they enslaved the Israelites. So in the next videos, I will explain why this dynasty was the pharaohs who enslaved the Israelites, and I will give all the details. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe, and see you on to the next video. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Blessings.